Welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, DJ Marcotte and John Soroyce. Enjoy the show.
Oh, hey everybody. Welcome back to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, the working class podcast. We are the Blue Collar Ballers. I am DJ. I'm here with my buddy John Soroyce. Also, we have a special guest here, John. My dog. He is the Rock, or Rocco, or Rocky, depending on who's talking to him. He has many names. He is he knows I'm talking about him because he's face to face with me now. He's a beautiful pit bull boxer mix with tiger stripes. He's a lovely fella. So he's hanging out with me today, John, over here at the Marcotte compound. Who's with you? You had a cat with you, I heard.
Yeah, I went out the door. I got rid of it.
Yeah? Like literally, you just whacked it out? Or
No, I didn't eat it, so I don't think that.
You just let it out of the room?
Just let it out of the room.
What's the cat's name?
Pebbles.
Pebbles. That's interesting. Did you come up with that?
No.
Is that all you have is just the one cat?
No, two actually. I have another one.
Is that Bam Bam?
Nope, Sophia.
Okay, I would have gone with Bam Bam.
I know. I thought Bam Bam and Pebbles would have been good.
So people may not know, but I've got a menagerie at my place. I've got 3 snakes. I just got a boa constrictor.
Oh, you did get that boa.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's just like Jake the Snake Roberts would carry around. He'll be about 7 feet long at one point. So if things, I'm just gonna say, if things go south in this world, don't come to my place because I got 3 snakes. If you're coming to rob a place, mine should not be the first one on your list. I've got my dog is an absolute Sherman tank. Hopefully he doesn't tip over my setup here. I've got about as many lizards as you can imagine. Yeah, we got a lot going on here at the Marcotte compound, and we got a bunch of kids running around too. So it's great over here. We have a lot of fun. So yeah, that's my random rant for the day. Do you have any fun stories for today, or any fun stuff going on?
No,
at work
I do have some inspiring news for our listeners though. We should be back to normal hopefully next week for our recordings.
Us. Okay,
yes,
I thought
us.
you meant like the world.
No.
I was gonna say let's pump the brakes there.
We're me and DJ are hopefully going to be back in the studios next week. Audio will be back to normal. Hopefully have video.
Video, yeah.
I'm thinking
again. I'm thinking Instagram Live, so we'll see how that goes. Like we mentioned on the last episode, it'll be nice to get back in there. I just had my daughter. The second she comes home, funny story about my daughter, John. And John and I are trying to mix in some anecdotes, when we have our shows, just kind of do a little small talk on every show because kind of breaks up the monotony a little bit, or not the monotony, but it adds a little splash of reality to our fantasy world that we have going on here. But my daughter, what do you think my daughter does the second she gets home every day? Bear in mind she'll be 4 on May 19th. Take a guess.
Probably turns it on TV.
She takes every stitch of clothing off that she has on immediately. She literally comes right through the door, and the first thing she does is just strip down to absolutely nothing.
She doesn't like wearing clothes?
Well, apparently not. It would appear no, and I'm grateful because she actually keeps them on during the course of the day. But yeah, my daughter comes home and her routine is to take absolutely every stitch of clothing off that she's wearing. She's been home with me a little bit lately. Normally she goes right down to the skivvies, but today she just went full Monty. So she's a peach, that one. Do you do that, John? Do you take all your clothes off when you get home?
No, usually I try within my first hour, just kind of relax. So like right now, I'm in my PJs, basically sweatpants, sweatshirt. I don't like my work clothes being on like any longer than a half hour when I get home.
Yeah, that's the one good thing about this not being at the studio is we can just kind of come as we are. When we're not on video, I'm just wearing yoga pants right now. It's great.
I don't know if that's great or not.
I'm just kidding. I don't want to scare anybody off. So anyway, we are the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, and as usual, you can check us out on our Facebook page at Armchair Fantasy Football, on Twitter at Armchair FF Pod. I'm on Twitter at Armchair Kingpin. John is on Twitter at John2977. You can email us at armchairfb@gmail.com. You can find us also on Instagram, armchair_fantasy_football. And of course, we're on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook Live. Sometimes we do, which we'll probably do that when we get back to the studio as well. Podbean, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'm going to kick the tires on iHeartRadio. I want to see what that's all about. So maybe we can sneak in there as well. But pretty much anywhere you want to look, you can find the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. And you should listen to us, and we'll tell you why a little bit later. But before that, John, what do we got for news?
So news compared to yesterday is short and sweet, but we still got some of the reports. So first bit on the agenda, Jared Goff is open to restructuring his contract deal to create cap room for the team.
They need cap room because they keep eating it up.
Yeah, between Gurley and
with Cooks and Gurley, yeah, and I wish I could feel bad for that team, John, but they dug themselves a hole giving Jared Goff, who I've never seen as an elite quarterback, and I'd argue he might not even be good. You know what I mean? He had 1 year where everything seemed to click on that offense, and other than that, he's been nothing but a first-round bust, frankly. And now, the contract that he's got, which I think is the second or third highest paid in the league at the quarterback position, now has really put them in a hole, in addition to the other bad decisions they made. They gave Gurley a big, huge deal and then cut him, and then that was a cap hit. And, they did the same thing with Cooks. They got a cap hit there. So this will help, but they still have talent enough, I think, John, to be competitive. Aaron Donald, they got some pieces on defense. Obviously got Jalen Ramsey last year. We've talked about the receiving core, how good that is. Even without Cooks, they've got Josh Reynolds who can step right up. So they definitely have the talent on the team. They don't have the quarterback, so they can restructure him all they want, but they're never going to win with that guy. And I don't even know that I'd touch him in fantasy, would you?
No, he just there's no consistency. Even that year he did well. I don't want to say he went off. He did well.
He had a great year.
Yeah, he wasn't that consistent though. If you look at his consistency ratings, he wasn't awful that year, but he wasn't elite either. But he had a decent year. But to me, Goff reminds me of Sam Bradford all over again. Like, have a few decent games, shines here and there, but is not the true answer for that team.
Yeah, and I think I would argue Sam Bradford was probably more talented, also more injury prone, though.
Correct.
Yeah, Sam Bradford's another guy that just robbed teams blind with the contracts that he got. So you got to eat what you cook, as an old boss of mine used to say. So we'll see how they can do with their franchise quarterback, and they've got some good pieces. I don't know what they're going to use that extra cap space for. Probably just to stay out of cap penalty and cap hell, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, right now they do not.
They're probably still trying to get under the cap, right?
I believe so, with all the dead cap space they have.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, they're not looking. It's not like they're going to sign a free agent without some casualty somewhere. So, to me,
as that same boss used to say, John, and I think you know who I'm talking about. Good luck with all of that.
Okay, now, in the college news, but it's NFL related, one scout told the Athletics' Bob McGinn that he believes Baylor's Denzel Mims is better than CeeDee Lamb and maybe better than Jerry Jeudy. Mims also had a video conference call with the Broncos yesterday.
I listened to a secret podcast, and I'm not going to tell anybody because it's that good of a podcast. That's probably bad juju for me right there, but tell people about our podcast though. But and I follow these guys, and they are very, very good at what they do. And I will throw a hint out there: they're very intertwined with Player Profiler and Denzel Mims. And I've even seen fantasy analysts out there, or heard them say that Denzel Mims could potentially be a more explosive DeAndre Hopkins. That's Matt Kelly that actually said that. I mean, this kid has got a lot of talent, and he could be very well better than those two guys. I definitely see it. It's funny, John, I was thinking on the ride home, I'm like, boy, if I'm sitting there at 10 in our Dynasty League, in a rookie draft, I'm all about that Denzel Mims life. I like this kid a lot, and I think it's starting to leak out that he might be better than people realize. So by the time the summer rolls around, depending on what team he goes to. But let's say he goes to Houston, even with Cooks there, they need somebody that isn't that Kenny Stills / Brandon Cooks / Will Fuller type of guy. And Mims would be a great fit there.
Yeah. Did you see who Player Profiler his comparison is to Mims is compared to?
I did, and I know there is a lot of comps to Hopkins for him.
Hopkins is one of them. The other one is your call that you made last year that exploded, Chris Godwin.
Chris Godwin, yeah. No, I did hear, yes, definitely some comps for Chris Godwin, too. So I like this guy a lot, man. And, I mean, I can't go wrong because we'll talk about this later, too. I've looked at a lot of rookies that I like in the first round at the 10th spot. So I'm not going to be disappointed with who I get, but I would like to get Mims, that's for sure. But, I mean, you pick right ahead of me, so we'll see how that goes.
Letting the cat out of the bag.
Maybe I'll trade up. We'll see.
Well,
you never know.
We're both working on it. I think we're both trying to move up in that dynasty draft because I'm trying too.
Yeah, okay. We'll see how that goes.
We'll see how it goes.
Mims is great, man, and at the right landing spot, he could be my favorite receiver this year out of the rookie class.
I think the secret's getting out, though, because it's like everybody's so high on Lamb, Judy. And I'm not saying they're not good. It's just you want to find one of these guys that you can get later, but is a pure gem, and that's what Mims is starting to turn into.
This, like I said yesterday, John, this year is so deep. You get Jalen Reagor. You got Denzel Mims. You got Michael Pittman's good. You got
KJ Hamler.
Yeah, and Lamb and even Ruggs. I mean, I'm not big on Ruggs. I think he's kind of a one-trick pony. But if he were to go to like a Denver with Sutton on the other side, so that's the thing with these rookies. And I know Denver actually had a video conference with Mims as well. I think that's the thing. It's all landing spot at this point. We know these guys are good, and there's a lot of good wide receivers in the draft. It's all about landing spot. And that's why we have our rookie draft in our Dynasty League right after the NFL draft, because it's so hard to draft blind in Dynasty. And I can't wait, man. I can't wait for the NFL draft. It's almost here. It's a week away.
Yeah. Thank God. Can't wait. Speaking of college football, still another scout said that Jerry Jeudy has the most superstar potential amongst all wide receivers in this year's draft class.
I like Jeudy. I really do. And I flip-flop between him and Lamb. I do think Lamb is a better prospect. And I still think Lamb is the closest. He's not a 5-star prospect, but I think he's the closest to a 5-star prospect in this draft class. I think Lamb is the best receiver in this draft class. The only problem I have with him is his size. Depending on when you look, around 199, in the 190s range.
Yeah.
And that I don't like that for a guy that could be pegged as a number one receiver. And I might even like Mims, like I just said, more than Jeudy. But all three of those guys, to me, those are the three guys that I look at as being the most NFL ready. I like all three of them.
Yeah.
So you're not gonna hear me say anything bad about Jeudy.
Yeah, Jeudy and Lamb. When I look at you look at their stats. It's right off the charts, and they're It's just not even what they did at the combine. It's just what you see for the stats that pop out. But then when I look at their size, like you said, Judy's floats anywhere from low 190s to upper 199, let's say, and same with Lamb. But then you look at I just forgot Mims, but he's around 207, 210. So he's the perfect size for a receiver. So,
yeah, and just a quick note on all of these guys. And you may have this in your news, John, but Las Vegas has said that they need to get a lot better at wide receiver. So they have, I think, the 13th pick, 11th or 13th pick in the draft. You can see one of those guys go there. Great landing spot. So,
yeah, I see one of the three going there. But might as well go into this news. This could change it up a little bit. But Arizona Cardinals general manager Steve Keim won't rule out adding a wide receiver at the number 8 pick.
Sometimes I think coaches just say things to get a reaction out of people. This is vintage trolling. I know they want to, have a really pass-heavy offense and a really fast-paced offense. But they have so many other needs, John, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I would almost say exclusively on the defensive side of the ball to go any offensive player other than, offensive line too. They need help
Yes.
there. But if they were to go anywhere but offensive line for Kyler Murray, who they think is their franchise quarterback, and if not that defense, then they probably should go back to football 101, I would say.
I mean, I think they got the talent at receiver. They have, Larry Fitzgerald, Andy Isabella, Christian Kirk. I mean, they're loaded at receiver. I think they can hold off a year. Like you said, it's probably a smokescreen. I think the smartest move they could make is protecting their franchise quarterback with an offensive lineman, at least with the first pick, and then going defense afterwards. But I don't know, unless they know something we don't, or it's a smokescreen. But I'm thinking what you are, which is complete smokescreen here.
Yep.
So, next bit of news, Joe Mixon from the Cincinnati Bengals is prepared for a holdout if him and the Bengals cannot reach a long-term deal.
Are these guys ever going to learn? I mean, okay, good luck with that, Joe Mixon. You're going to hold out in a COVID-19 year where the guys that are around the team are the ones that are going to get the ball and get the most action. Like, I don't know. Stuff like this, I'm just so tired of these holdouts. If you think you're going to hold out, then don't sign the rookie deal. I'm on that side of it at this point because... Well,
not to mention, you have free agents like Devontae Freeman, LaShawn McCoy. They could have both of them. And then, look what happened to Melvin Gordon because of this.
And Joe Mixon, dude, maybe you should live up to the hype first. I'm just saying. And I know he's a guy that... And I like him for this year, but I liked him for last year. We liked him as a rookie. When is he going to live up to the hype? He's been very inconsistent, and we're just making excuse after excuse of why he hasn't performed. And again, I think with Burrow in there, I think with an improved offensive line, he's going to be great, but just go to work, dude. This is not the year to hold out. It really is.
No, not during this whole thing. No way. Totally agree. So one last bit of news to finish up, and then we can start onto our topic. Panthers coach Matt Rule wants to avoid having Christian McCaffrey on the field for every snap.
Who called that, bro? Who called that? And I tend to believe this because they just paid this guy how much, John? $60 million?
$60 million a year.
You're not going to pay a guy $60 million and bury him into the ground. You're just not going to do that. Now you need to protect your investment. And I think that you are going to see McCaffrey. He's going to regress this year, guys. He's not going to be a bust, in the definition of the word, but there's some bust potential in terms of some major, I think potentially major regression here, John. Am I wrong?
He's not going to have the 1,000 receiving and 1,000 rushing. I could see in the target share was phenomenal. I mean, I can still see that. Based on the fact that dump-off passes from Bridgewater and all that still. Plus their line hasn't improved, so good dump passes will always happen.
Yeah, I think Bridgewater is to his benefit. But again, like I said, as a McCaffrey owner, if you're in Keeper Dynasty, you almost didn't want him to sign that deal because, like I said, now they have to protect their investment. And the other side of the coin is, John, this guy, and we mentioned in the last episode, this guy has never missed a game due to injury, as far as I know. So that's what I call whistling past the graveyard. It's going to happen eventually.
So what you're saying is I should trade him in Dynasty?
No, I'm not saying that. But I will say this. If you did, John, his value is as high as it's going to ever be right now. So you could definitely trade him for a king's ransom and be laughing all the way to the bank maybe by the end of the season, and we'll see though, but good for him. But as a fantasy owner, I would be nervous because they're not just going to grind him into the ground like they did last year. And now you got Matt Rule saying, we're not going to grind him into the ground.
He was literally 98, 99% usage last year. It was nothing I've never seen. So
it's ridiculous.
To sustain that level is phenomenal. And I'm not saying it's not him as a player, but he would literally be out of the league in 3 years because of how much pain he would gain from this.
Right.
So, okay, that's it for news.
Oh, jeepers creepers. So what we're on to now, we talked about how to build a better league. on the last episode, John. So now we kind of want to discuss how to win your league, and we'll kind of spitball some of this on some ideas that we have, but some old stuff, some new stuff. But the first and foremost thing, John, for me is what you guys are doing right now. And if you're not, well, you're not going to hear me. And this is why you want to spread the word to your fantasy brethren out there, is listening to Fantasy Football Podcast truly gives you an edge over the competition. Specifically this one. I mean, you talked about, John, guys like Chris Godwin last year. You talked about guys like Mark Andrews. I mean, we predicted a lot of guys.
Christian McCaffrey.
Early on in the I don't know if we can hang our head on that, John.
It was the one thing I was truly right on.
Who wasn't right on McCaffrey? But yeah, that's a horrible example, John. Everybody knew about McCaffrey. But it's no different this year. We're talking about the Jonnu Smiths of the world. We're predicting things before they happen because we know what to look for. So if you're not listening to podcasts, specifically the Working Class Podcast, the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, you are absolutely doing yourself a disservice. And what else are you going to do right now, guys? I mean, you can even, if you miss some episodes, you can even binge listen to them right now. A lot of people sitting at the house. And if you're not sitting at the house, when I listen to them, John? In my car, on my commute. It just plug the old thing into your little jack there with your USB or whatever that thing is, and go to town. And we will help you win a championship just by listening to us every single episode, because we know how to do it and we know the little secrets. We're about to talk about more of those secrets, but even John, I give John a hard time because he doesn't listen to podcasts enough, and that's why I beat his ass every year, because he's behind the curve on me. At least the last few years, right, John?
Yeah, I haven't won one. I didn't win any last year before I won. So,
but for us, like the example of this is a lot of the guys in our league listen to us, and it's harder for us to win.
Oh, it is a lot harder now.
They have developed that additional advantage that they can just peer into our brains, and we don't hold back. We're talking about DJ Chark with one of our league mates, and I'm like, dude, you got to keep him over Cortland Sutton. It's just in my nature to give fantasy football advice, and talking about breakouts like that. And DJ Chark will be on the next breakout list. Spoiler alert. There's guys that we can get on your team if you listen to this show, and they're going to help you win a championship. So listen to podcasts, listen to other podcasts too. The more the merrier, and we'll help you win.
Yeah,
John?
I mean, the other part of it, though, too, it's podcasts. There's so many different podcasts to listen to. You're going to find one that you relate to, which us relate to more than anybody. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
We're the blue-collar ballers here.
We are you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, we are you guys.
The other part of it is it's diving into fantasy data, which I love looking at analytics, and it's recognizing things, and it's the podcasts are great, but then it's researching stuff. That's what me and DJ will bring you during these busts or sleepers is numbers. Like a lot of people are like, why is everybody big on Calvin Ridley this year? Well, there's 150 targets vacated over there. That's why I'm high on Ridley. You have a lot. The mouse are gone. There's only 2 target monsters there now, really, to feed. Even if you add Gurley into it, he takes Freeman. You still have all of Austin Hooper's targets, and that doesn't even count what the other receivers, So there's a ton of targets to go around. It's finding those gems, looking at, not just the data, but the player profilers. And it's people just moving across teams, but the data is right in front of us, and it's a matter of breaking it down and finding those gems.
Well, we'll break it all down for you. And, I look at a guy like, we'll go to Terry McLaurin, too. I love Terry McLaurin this year, and that guy will help you win a fantasy championship because you're going to get him at a much lower price than guys that probably won't be as productive as him. Cortland Sutton's that everybody's in love with. I don't think Cortland Sutton's going to hold the jock of Terry McLaurin this year. And we're not right all the time, but when we know what to look for. You're looking at dominator ratings. You're looking at yards per target. You're looking at efficiency with multiple quarterbacks. You're looking at so many different things, air yards, a ton of different things, and then all of a sudden you string a bunch of them together for a player, and you're onto something, and that's kind of where Terry McLaurin, we're seeing that, and a number of other guys. So, like last year, John with Calvin Ridley last year, and myself with Andrews and Godwin. I mean, countless others. DJ Moore was one of those guys, and these guys are not under the radar, but predicting those breakouts is one of the biggest things you can gain from listening to our show. And frankly, Jake with Austin Hooper. You know what I mean? These guys are kind of unsung guys, and then we break it down and we look and we're like, oh, wait a minute, we've got something here, and it just needs a little bit more of a nudge, and then those guys are superstars, and that's how you win the league. Really, I hate to say it, but one of the biggest ways to win the league is to find those guys. Everybody's getting good players in the first and second round. It's those guys those gems that you find that are really truly going to put you over the top. One of the ways to find those gems, John, is the waiver wire. So talk to us about the waiver wire. What's your strategy?
Strategy for the waiver wire is, you got to be – it depends what type of league you're in. So like we said yesterday on the last podcast was, if you're not doing fab, it's basically a free-for-all, which is wrong. But most leagues now have fab, but you got to sit there and put the investment into it when you're doing not free agency, but using the waiver wire. So if you sit there with $200 fab money, you don't want to blow all $200 that first week, because it's just going to set you up for failure for the rest of the year. So you have to kind of set yourself a budget, but at the same time, how bad do you want that player, for one, and two, how much do you expect that player to break out? Are they a 1 week fill-in, or are they a rest of the season fill-in? So let's say Mark Ingram goes down for the year. Gus Bus is the perfect, waiver wire pickup, but you have somebody bidding 18, or are you going to bid 38 or 58? It's all about using the right amount of fab money in what you project for this guy. If he's a 1 week fill-in, you don't go spending $50, $60 of fab money in 1 week for a 1 week fill-in, unless you drafted bad and you only have one running back to start that week. It's different circumstances.
No, but you look at a guy, I'd say in 2018, like Philip Lindsay, who all of a sudden week one was like, holy cow, is this the guy in Denver? And that's a guy those are times. See, I spend early. I spend early and often. And sometimes, that works to my advantage, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I miss on guys. Sometimes I hit on guys. Deebo Samuel was a guy where I grabbed before he even, it wasn't because anybody got hurt. It was just because I liked what he brought to the table, in particular in the style of offense that he was in. So that's a guy you don't have to spend a ton on. I might have got him for like $5 or
I think you got him for $1. I really do.
It might have been along those lines. But then a guy that hit in week one, you're going to have to spend up for. And you're going to have to make a decision. And I made the decision, I don't buy Philip Lindsay, and I was wrong that year, and we had Jake in our league who got him and paid a decent amount for him. But if you really want a guy, there's no such thing as overspending. And same in the draft, and we'll talk about that when we get to the draft, because that's a big part of winning your league. But in terms of fab, if I want, dude, John has seen me spend $80 on a $100 budget on a guy, just because I want that guy. We had a guy in our league we mentioned on the last show, Noel, and it was like probably the best season I've ever seen this guy have. Some knucklehead by the name of Alex dumped Russell Wilson. He dumped Russell Wilson, and the quarterback he had, like, he made a decision and he cut Wilson, and the other guy was just trash. That might have been like a Cousins or something. And Noel went out and got him, and he spent 30 out of 100 fab bucks. I'm like, boy, that's an awful lot, dude. He's like, I wanted him, and I got him. And that kind of stuck in my head. I'm like, this dude's actually right. If you want him, there's no such thing as overspending. So I like to spend early and often on the waiver wire. John is a little bit more reserved than I am. I'm more of a drunken sailor, and he's more like Scrooge McDuck. He kind of saves a little bit better than I do, but that's a strategy that works for you, John. And why do you use that strategy?
Just because later on in the week, my team.
Later on in the year, you mean?
Yeah, many a times I've had my roster and all that, and then week 3, week 4 come up, I get injury prone, my team. And it's not because I draft people that are injury prone. I've had people that have never gotten injured, and all of a sudden, they're on my team, and they're all hurt.
Oh, here we go. Pity party.
No, it's not pity party. It just happens. It's part of fantasy football. So
right, it definitely is.
I don't like to blow all my money at once, so that way, if something happens, I mean, look at, who do I have last year? David Johnson. Didn't start after week 3 or week 4.
Yeah.
And, thank God the Fab money saved me and helped me get another back, but it was, who was it? I had to do a trade, actually. Matt Breida had to get from you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I made
so,
one on that.
but that's the thing. It's, you never can predict what's going to happen in fantasy football, or football as a matter of fact, but I feel like I don't want to blow it all at once just because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and one more thing on the as far as Fab is concerned, I don't bid in incremental numbers. Don't put a $5 bid down, because guess what? Everybody's putting a $5 bid down. $5 is such an incremental number that it's so easy for I'll put $5 on them. So that's why you put 6, put 7. Don't go 5, 10, 25. Even 3. I might put a $3 bid on somebody. I think I put a $4 bid in our Dynasty League for a guy that John completely overspent on with Alexander Madison, but he wanted him and he got him. I put a $4 bid because I'm like, John will probably bid 3. So I'm going 4 because 3, there's no way I'm putting that down, because there might be another guy out there like me that's like, this guy's going to bid in an incremental number, so I'm putting that. I'm doing an odd, weird number, like a $7 bid or, a $23 bid, or, John did a $16 bid for Madison in our Dynasty League, which actually wasn't that bad. He spent a lot more than I was willing to spend. And why did you do that? Because you're like, somebody's going to bid 15. Am I right?
Yep. And then the other part of it was Cook is not known for staying healthy. So it's a great pickup. If Cook goes down, Madison's the number 1 there by a long shot.
Yeah, I was really surprised to see him cut. So that's kind of the Fab strategy. Spend a lot if you want the guy. Don't be afraid to, because I got news for you. And the other reason John does save money, I don't know if you mentioned it, John, is because at the end of the year, there's going to be a lot of guys with no money. And if somebody gets hurt, and all of a sudden, like, let's say we'll use your example. If Mark Ingram gets hurt, Gus Bus is there, and everybody else is out of money. Guess who's getting Gus Bus? So that's definitely part of the advantage too of saving. I just can't do it. I see guys that I want, and I go out and get them.
Yeah, but you did one thing you forget to mention to the listeners, though. Yeah, you might be out of money, but you also made a trade this year where you got $100 Fab back.
I did, yeah, and that's the other thing too. Maybe we should have built that in to build a better league, but Fab money for us is a tradable asset. So you can actually trade players for Fab in our league too. The other thing there too with that whole spending early for me, John, is I always find gems that late in the year that I don't even have to spend a red cent on. It's just they're always there, but you have to, as we like to say, beat the waiver wire on those guys.
Yeah, but you're like me. You like to think weeks ahead, and some people don't. They wait till that week.
So I'm glad you said that. So what triggers you, John, to look at a guy and say, in 3 weeks, I got a funny feeling he's going to be starting. What makes you think that? What are the things that you look for? For me, it's like somebody coming back from suspension. I'll go get him 2 weeks earlier on the waiver wire than 2 weeks prior to him coming back. Because guess what? Everybody else is like a week prior. They're like, oh, he's coming back next week. I'm going to go get him. And then they go to the wire and they're like, oh man, it's on DJ's team or he's on John's team.
Yeah, no,
that's one example. But what are some of the other things you look for, John, to say, oh, I got to get that guy now because 2 weeks from now I think he'll start because of why?
For me, I look at my team. I look at what hiccups I have ahead. So I'm looking at my schedule always ahead. I'm not just planning for the week to win. I'm planning for the weeks ahead to win and who's in the best spot. So the other part of it, though, too, is it's also knowing the news. So if you know a player's coming back week 4, how does he impact an other player possibly? Or it helps or hurts, you know what I'm saying? So I look ahead. And basically, if I know, let's say, Larry Fitzgerald, let's just throw this out there, 4-game suspension, he's back week 5. Well, I'm not waiting until week 4 to pick him up. I'm thinking week 1 or 2.
Right. No, and I think I already used that example, John. But what are like other ways that you do that? So if you're looking at a player, so I looked at Deebo Samuel, for example, and I'm like, this guy's a really good scheme fit. He's got a ton of talent. I loved him out of college. I love all of his metrics. I love his yards after the catch. And there's opportunity on that team. So is that something you look at and say, okay, well, I got a guy like Terry McLaurin. The rest of that wide receiver group is trash. I think I'm going to snag him just to see how it works out.
It's a little
example.
It's a little harder at the beginning of the season because unless you watch preseason adamantly, it's watching some of the trends. So basically, let's say a guy last year averaged 3 targets a game. Let's use McLaurin, for example. Let's say he was a rookie. He's a rookie. You didn't expect him to get 6 to 8 targets a game or more. So you look at the trends, you look at the data, and then just looking at like preseason to tell early on. But I like, as a regular season going, you see some of the trends. If, Kirk Cousins is throwing to, Chad Beebe, he's getting 9 targets a game and no one's picked him up. Well, this guy's averaging 9 targets a game. He's averaging 50 yards. Let's say he's getting 6. He's double digits for like 4 straight weeks, but yet no one's picked him up. Oh, right. Boom. Adam Thielen gets hurt. Who's popping now? Chad Beebe. So you see that He's been involved, but how much more heavily is he involved now that the injuries happen? You know what I'm saying? Than the trend now. So basically, Beebe's a guy that could possibly get 15, 16 points instead of the 10 or 11.
Yeah, so you're looking at a situation where if a guy gets hurt, then this guy's going to be a potential stud. The other thing I look for, and it kind of ties into the Deebo Samuel deal there, but I picked up DJ Chark on the waiver wire after week 1, I think it was, John, and then I cut him for somebody else. I said, I don't know. Then I cut him for somebody else. And what I learned there is, if you have an undefined wide receiver core, and Terry McLaurin's another example of that, then you should probably at least grab 1 or 2 assets from that wide receiver core. And had I kept DJ Chark, my team would have been even better than it was. So that's kind of what I look for, too, is those undefined wide receiver cores where guys haven't really quite carved out their niche as the top guy, and it's up for grabs, so to speak. Those are the guys I look for, too, on the waiver wire to jump the wire. And Chark is a great example of that. If I had kept him in week 1 when I had that intuition to get him, I would have had him long before anybody would have even thought of it. So that's another thing that I look at personally. The other thing on the waiver wire for me at the beginning of the season is if you have, let's use Alexander Madison. You know where I'm going with this, John? Let's use him as an example.
Okay.
If you're the Dalvin Cook owner, you better get up against the wall because it's handcuff time. You need to get an Alexander Madison. If you have Ezekiel Elliott, you need to get a Tony Pollard. And I wouldn't do it on any team with any player. Like Christian McCaffrey, I don't think early in the season you need to get, I don't even remember the kid's name.
Reggie Bonifant,
who I stashed all year long waiting for McCaffrey.
I remember that.
Didn't work out that way. But, you don't need to do that early in the season. But if you have a running back that has a clear cut, his backup will be the next man up. You know what I mean? Then those are the guys that I think that you handcuff, and Pollard and Madison are probably the 2 best examples, but there are others out there, and that's, as an owner, you need to make sure that if you have an obvious insurance policy for your stud running back, stash that guy all year. I will have Tony Pollard, and I will stash him all year long, just in case. So, picking up those handcuffs on the waiver wire for you is critical as well. At the end of the season, John, what do I do at the end of the season with my running backs?
What do you mean?
You tout this all the time. I handcuff all of them.
Oh, you playoff time, you have a handcuff for all of them.
You know what I've learned throughout this whole podcast thing that we've done, John? I cannot put you on the spot. Your brain just completely stops. Maybe we should script that ahead of the time, but I handcuff every running back, every viable running back that I have. So at the end of the season, if I have, Christian McCaffrey, I'm going to get Reggie Bonifant right around week 12, because especially if I know that I'm on track for the playoffs. If you're if you're not on track for the playoffs and you're still trying to fight for it, you might not want to do that. But if you're in a good spot and you're coasting into the playoffs, you cut every bit of dead weight off your bench and you handcuff every single running back that you have, especially your top 2 or top 3. And it works for me every year, John.
Yeah, you had Raquel Armstead last year for Fournette. You had Pollard for Elliott. You had your handcuffs, and you had them, I think, by week 9 last year because you were
some of them.
Yeah, you were cruising to the playoffs.
Yeah.
So
that's just something I would definitely recommend. And I know some people aren't advocates for the handcuff, but if you're already cruising into the playoffs, do you really need, try to think of a guy, do you really need a Sterling Shepard on your bench? Or would you rather have security at that running back position? If you've got 2 or 3 stud running backs, you should handcuff them all for sure, because it's security. It's an insurance policy. What about trades, John?
Trades are important, especially, let's use, for example, last year. My team was injury-ridden. And if I didn't make a trade, I made a trade with you, and it helped my team tremendously.
The ultimate opportunist was there waiting for you,
yep.
John.
And I had to trade Devontae Adams. You wanted Devontae Adams. But that trade, ultimately, I almost made the playoffs. I just missed the playoffs.
Yeah, and you got a lot of depth. I know we talked about Burita. Terry McLaurin was involved in that deal. Mark Andrews was in that deal. There were draft picks in that deal. And that wasn't all. There were other good players that you got. I just sent a truckload of good, solid guys with upside to you, and you gave up one of your studs, but you did it to survive, and that's what you have to look. You have to be an opportunist. I hate to say it, but you have to look at people's weaknesses and you have to strike. And it doesn't mean that you're taking them to the cleaners on a trade, but I will say this, John. If you get a guy to agree to a deal, that means it's a good enough deal, unless the guy's an absolute buffoon. And if that deal that you make pisses everybody else off, you did a really good job on that trade. You know what I mean? And we used an example yesterday of a guy that traded Cooper Kupp, who was coming up. Cooper Kupp was hot last year at the beginning of the season, and he traded him for a few pieces. I think Kenyon Drake was one of them. Brandon Cooks was one of them. I want to say maybe there was another piece in there too that was a solid piece, and everybody was so hot under the collar that it was such a bad deal. And then at the end of the year, it was a better deal for the guy that gave away Kupp. So if you make a deal and people are pissed about it, that means you did a really good job, and that's what you have to do, And I think sometimes, John, people look at deals like, oh, they get a bunch of B. They got like 4 B players for an A player, for an A+ player. Well, yeah, sometimes what you have to do if you're in a spot where you're fighting for the playoffs and you need depth and you have injuries and the only way you're going to get into the playoffs is if you have a better, more balanced starting lineup. Yeah, you got to trade a stud in a lot of cases.
Yeah, but
I'm the guy there waiting all the time, especially at the end of the season. So for me, you got to look at opportunities on the other team, but you also have to be realistic. And you also, John, have to know who your trade allies are, right?
Correct.
What is a trade ally, John?
Someone you always basically trade with, always strike a deal with. There's plenty of examples I could use with you. There's always people you've always had as allies with trades, and you're not taking them to the cleaner. You're giving them fair deals. Actually, sometimes the better deal, and then people just get upset because they're like, why would you give them this, this, and this? Because you got the player you wanted, ultimately. Yes. So is it worth it? Yes.
And on the other side of that, those allies are adversaries, trade adversaries. And those are guys that are just not reasonable. They don't want to make a reasonable deal with you for whatever reason. And some people don't want to trade with you just because they're pissed off that you made so many good trades. That's a thing. That's a real thing.
Oh, I agree.
So I'll give Jake as an example of a mix of both of those things. I think Jake is very resentful that I make. He's even said, he's like, I don't know how you get those trades, how you get to do so many trades with people. But Jake is also one of those guys, and we won't say the word, but we all know what the R trader is. We won't say that actual R word, but he's also one of those guys. So as an example, in our Dynasty League, I'm like, I bet I can get Juju Smith-Schuster on the low, on the cheap. And he probably isn't going to be any good this year because he's in a contract year, and Pittsburgh basically said, you're walking after this year. But he'll be on another team in 2021, and the sky's the limit for him from there. It could be, who knows? It could be New England. It could be wherever. So then I'm like, I just had a hunch, and I said, hey, I texted Jake, and I said, hey, do you have Juju Smith-Schuster in Dynasty? And he's like, yes. And then right then and there, that's where the negotiations ended. Because I'm not going to waste my time with somebody that wants way too much, and they always say, well, I don't want to give them away.
Well, you
don't want to give them away, but you also want the world for a guy that's just okay.
The problem with those kind of people you're trading with is they go by that 1 year they broke out instead of going by current year. So
sometimes.
Yes, sometimes. And Jake is that type, I hate to say it. He goes by what Juju did that one great career year instead of what he's doing currently.
Yeah.
And sometimes
there's a lot of people that lack foresight for sure.
Yes. So let's be honest. Juju last year was not a wide receiver 1 at all. He wasn't even a wide receiver 2. But yet the King's ransom is still a wide receiver 1.
But he still has value. So anyway, I don't want to get off the rails here. What the point of the conversation is. The point of the conversation is know who your allies are and know who your adversaries are. And if you have trade adversaries like I do, I have developed some over the years. There's a few. Don't even waste your time. Why waste your time? Focus on one of your trade allies that you can negotiate with, and you're going to find that that's going to be a lot more beneficial. And on top of that, if you're trading with somebody and, you've made a few decent offers and you're bouncing back and forth and you're 3 days in, sometimes you just got to throw in the towel, right, John, and say, I'm going to live to fight another day. Have you ever had an experience like that?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, last year, I made a lot of moves, and I knew the moves were going to hurt me, like trading for Saquon Barkley, trading my first pick last year, but it wasn't just that. I knew I had the rebuild last year. I did not have a lot of early picks last year. It hurt my team ultimately. But what did I say? It's a rebuilding year, but then injuries happen. I had to make these trades. I had to trade a Devontae Adams to stand a chance, and I didn't end up, considering how bad my team was with injuries and with where I picked in the draft-wise, I don't think I ended up too bad. Not where I wanted to be, but just missed. But it could have been a lot worse.
You're all over the place today. That wasn't even close to the question I asked you. What I'm saying is, bear with John today, guys. I think he's struggling even more so than usual. What I'm saying is those exhausting trade negotiations that go 3 or 4 days that just never, it's like it's frustrating. You feel like you're almost there, and then. It's like fishing, John, and you feel like you got something on the line, and all of a sudden it swims away. Sometimes you need to know. You can find out early on in that process if this is just going to be an arduous marathon trade negotiation, and if it is, just don't waste your time. Focus on your allies and the guys that you can rationalize with, and the guys that you can negotiate with an open mind. Don't go. So you got your marathon traders and your adversary traders. You want to stay as far away from those people as possible, and you're gonna find out who they are pretty quickly.
The one thing I will say I learned from DJ about trading is that, for one, he is the trade whisperer. 2, he gives you a deadline. So if you don't follow it, the deal is off the table. That. He literally will say, you have till 11 p.m. to make this deal happen tomorrow. And if you don't do it, the deal's off the table. Trust me, I've had it happen to me. But I'll
live to fight another day.
You also call my bluff, too, and you'll be like, you're really not interested. I can tell because you would have responded. But then there's been times I literally accept the trade you've given.
Right.
But that's one thing I have learned from you over the last couple of years is when the deal's on the table, you have 24 hours. You don't respond, the deal's off because you'll move on.
We're not negotiating with terrorists.
Yep.
If you want the deal, you want the deal. We're not going to sit here and play patty cake for a few days. That ain't going to happen in my world. And it works to my advantage a lot. And that's why I don't fall in love with a trade offer that I send, because if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm on to the next one. It's like being at a. So if I go, I'll go. It's like going up to a bar and hitting on the first chick, and she slaps you in the face. Well, there's another chick about 4 feet down, or 6 feet these days, that you can hit on there. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that. It's kind of like speed dating, right?
Yes.
And you'll eventually find a trade partner that you can share your trading love with. But it doesn't. You don't have to fall in love on the first one. So trade often. I would say constantly. The one thing for me with trades and with the waiver wire, John, is my team is fluid. It's always changing. It's always morphing because things change every week, and you have to change with that. You have to change with the tide every week, and I'm always morphing things. And another real quick thing on trades, at the end of the season, what do we always do? I know I'm going to put you on the spot here, and I hope you're not going to struggle with this, but at the end of the season, and if you're in the playoff hunt, what is one of the things that you are always going to do, John, in terms of trades, what you're looking for?
Well, if you're in the playoffs, you're trading beforehand to find the best schedule for the playoffs.
So that's one thing. That's a good example. So you're looking for guys. That's a great example. So talk about that.
Yeah. So okay, let's say the trade deadline is over week 11 in your league. I'm just using that example as the week. Week 9, you're looking ahead at their schedule. So let's say Ezekiel Elliott. Week 12, 13, 14, 15, the championships and the playoffs, the end of the year, Ezekiel Elliott has the easiest schedule in the league. So you're trying to make a trade for him to get him so that way your playoff run, because he has the easiest schedule, he will kill it.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't have to be a Zeke Elliott. It can be a Joe Mixon.
Yeah, but I'm saying you see that opportunity, so you find out that, let's say, the strength of schedule, I don't even say strength of schedule, but who they're playing. Let's say Joe Mixon is playing the 5 bottom defenses for week 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way to the fantasy championship. He's got the easiest schedule amongst running backs. You're making that trade. You're recognizing that trade beforehand, before the playoffs even get there. You're already prepared before the playoffs have gotten there.
Right. And the other thing I look at, too, is who you have on your team that's got a tough schedule for the playoffs. You want to unload those guys. And sometimes you can make a lot of hay on those guys because they're bigger names. So that's a great point, John, is looking at that playoff schedule down the stretch. The other thing down the stretch is, and I do this every single year, when it gets around the trade deadline time, I look at my team and I say, I've got some really good players here. There are other teams that are fighting to get into the playoffs. It's time for me. I'm in the playoffs. It's time for me to stack up those studs and look for studs. And, the Devontae Adams is an example. That trade happened earlier on in the year because John definitely got decimated early on with injuries. But that's the type of trade. It's like you got to go find those guys that they can make the playoffs, but they just don't have the depth, and they need wins bad. They need wins. And one stud's not going to get you wins. You need depth. And I trade that depth to get that stud because I can lose out the rest of the season, but I got these studs for the playoffs, and I'm going to be in really good shape. I'm not worried about bye weeks in week 14 because I got these studs, and I can just plug and play somebody if I have to. So I always look for studs. And the other thing, too, John, down the stretch, and you're a big advocate for this, but if you have Pat Mahomes, do everything you can to get Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. If you have Dak Prescott, do everything you can to get Amari Cooper or Gallup. And those are just a couple examples, especially if you can combine that with if those guys have easy schedules. So there's so many different things at the end of the season, so many strategies. There's 2 seasons, John. Make no mistake about it. One season is the regular season where you're getting your way into the playoffs. So there's 2 sets of teams. There's that team that gets you there, and then you develop a new team that gets you through the playoffs into the championship. So for me, my team never, even in week 11, sometimes doesn't even look remotely close to my team.
No, not to mention
week 15.
If you have the depth like you've had before, like you said, you're trading one of your guys, yes, to possibly get a stud, or I've even seen you do it. You're solidified in the playoffs. You've got the roster you want. You have a couple floating guys that are still, wide receiver 2s or borderline wide receiver 1s. I've seen you trade them for next year's picks just to help that team out so possibly they get into the playoffs, but now you just stacked your team for next year for picks.
Oh, yeah, man. This year, I have 2 picks in each of the first 5 rounds.
That's crazy.
So not only do I stack studs, but I stack my picks too. And sometimes I wonder how I do it. Like that's it. To do both of those things, and sometimes you just can't teach that, John. And just on a side note, I do smell what The Rock is cooking right now because he's got a little bit of gas going on. So getting a little hot under the collar.
That's not a good Rock cooking right there.
No. So, yeah, there's a lot going on with trades there. There's a lot to unpack there, but listen to it a few times if you have to because it's all really, really good information. But the biggest thing I would say is in terms of trades, look at weaknesses, look at opportunities, look at where another team is hurting and their back is against the wall. And then, look at your allies, the teams that are willing to trade and willing to have reasonable negotiations with you. Those are probably the 2 biggest things in terms of trading. That's definitely square one.
I agree.
What about draft strategy, John? That's one of the big ones.
Well, draft strategy, it depends on, if you're in a redraft league, we're in a keeper league, so you got to look at.
Well,
like for me, I'm running backs early and often. I'm not saying I like wide receivers, but it depends on my team. So like this year, I have my keepers are Barkley, Kenny Golladay, Michael Gallup, Calvin Ridley. I think I'm pretty good at wide receiver. So my draft strategy, pretty much, first pick is going to be a running back in the first round. Second round, probably a running back. I like my draft strategy. You can never have enough running backs.
So you like to kind of build. You like to attach a position to each round.
For the most part, but not always. It all depends what's sitting there because if you have an elite tight end, like you've told me, and I've learned this from you, if an elite tight end, the number 1 tight end is sitting there, he's the best at his position, and he's going to score points. So, yeah, you might take a little bit of a downgrade to having like a Joe Mixon, but if I have a Travis Kelce, he's going to outscore Mixon.
Yeah.
Should at least. But it's tier-based drafting I've learned from you.
Yeah, so for me, it is tier-based drafting to a degree, and that's basically picking the best at each position as you go through. But you also have to fill out your roster, too, so I think you have to balance that. For me, I agree with John. You need to have a good stable of running backs. There's that 0 RB strategy. I've never seen it work. So, that's just me. And I've seen it really be detrimental to a lot of people's teams when they try to do that. But yeah, for me, the big thing, John, and I do like to tier-based draft. I do like to take the best at each position. But then you get to the draft drought, as I like to call it. And what is the draft drought? It's that round or 2 where and we've all been there, where everything you look at is just gross and you want to vomit all over yourself and you don't like any of those players. So much like I said, there's no such thing as overspending. In my world, there's no such thing as reaching. And let me rationalize that. When I say that there's no such thing as reaching is if I pick Terry McLaurin 2 rounds ahead of where his ADP is or his ranking is, well, that's where other people are ranking or picking him. If I'm picking him, let's say he's a 6th round talent, and I'm guessing. And if I pick him in the 4th round, or let's say he's a 5th round talent, and I pick him in the 3rd round, that's because I think he's going to give me 3rd round value. So if I think that, it would stand to reason that it's not a reach in my mind. You know what I mean? And with that being said, that means although I might overpay for him a little bit, that also means that I am ahead of the curve on this guy, and I'm going to get him before anybody else has a chance to because I believe that much in him. So there's, that's just kind of an example of where I don't think there is such a thing as reaching, and that the draft drought period there is a great time to do something like that, And a lot of times it's like the 5th, 6th, 7th round in that range. So that's a time, John, for me, is if I'm a big believer, let's say Jordan Love has a great landing spot, and I'm a big believer in Jordan Love, and maybe a quarterback's a bad example. I'd have to be looking at rankings right now to give a good example, but that's where I'll reach for a guy that's, even in the, maybe a 10th or 9th round ADP, because I hate all these guys. Remember, so I'll give you an example. This was some trade whisperer brilliance, if I may add. I think it was 2018, John. I drafted Jerick McKinnon in the second round, and I hated myself.
Oh, I remember.
I absolutely hated myself for it. And during that draft drought area, I think I drafted like Rex Burkhead, and I hated myself for it. And there were a few players I had that I drafted. It was the worst draft I've ever had, and it's that same year that we both made the championship. It was agonizing for me to take Jerick McKinnon. And who did I trade for, John? I can't even remember. I traded for Kareem Hunt.
Yep.
And I traded like 3 guys that were fine, but I didn't like them, for like Kareem Hunt and then a second round pick for next year. And then Kareem Hunt was awesome. And then right before Kareem Hunt got suspended, I traded him for another guy. It was just a perfect storm. But the point is, like, I just hated to draft Jerick McKinnon. So you don't have to do that. That's a point where you can reach for a guy that you actually do like, or just trade him immediately after the draft as quick as humanly possible.
You literally did it 5 minutes after the draft ended.
Yeah, it was glorious.
It was that.
And then the icing on the cake was trading Kareem Hunt right before he got suspended.
Oh yeah, you were awesome. You literally traded him, and then next week later it was Kareem Hunt.
No, it wasn't the next week. It was several weeks later.
Still, I mean, you still did it ahead of time, but it was a good move.
Awesome. It was awesome. But anyway, there's no such thing as reaching. Get that out of your mind. Back to the handcuff. I draft handcuffs for guys like I have Zeke. I draft Tony Pollard just because I want that handcuff all year long. I don't want to take any chances. Just have a strategy going in, but don't be afraid to divert from that strategy. So what I like to do is come into the draft with a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan. And, I never typically get stumped. I think I only got stumped once in a draft because I always have a backup to the backup to the backup. And you can't fall in love with a handful of guys, because if you fall in love with a handful of guys and they get sniped from you, even a few of them, you're going to fall apart, and it's going to ruin the rest of your draft. It's a lot like golf, John. Have you ever played golf?
No, but I get the game. I understand the game.
So when you play golf, the draft, like each round of the draft is like a hole in golf, the hole that you're playing. And if you have a meltdown hole or two in golf, you're done for the rest of the day. There ain't no coming back from that. Not for a regular guy like me or you. And it's the same with the draft. Your draft can melt down so easily if you get sniped a couple of times. So you can't fall in love with anybody really, and definitely don't fall in love with just a handful of guys. Look at as many different players as you can and give yourself as many options as you can. So for me, when a draft when it's coming to my pick, John, I got like 10 guys that I'm like, I'm happy getting any of these guys in this round. And that's kind of where coming in with a game plan is great, but you have to have a million backup plans to your game plan, right?
Yeah, you always have people prioritize which round, how many, and you even know when you think they're going to get sniped, so you're a round ahead.
Yep.
So that's a thing that's really worked, but then you just have that one pick. It's not a reach. It's kind of shocking. You'll be like, oh, Tom Brady went in the 4th round, and you're like, oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You just made, it's those picks too that kind of change up the draft though too, because I'm not saying specifically Tom Brady, but maybe Chris Godwin. Let's say his ADP last year was a 9, and he went in the 2nd. And everybody's like, wow, he went early, but like you said, is he worth it for that person? But it changes up the schematics of the draft.
All right, John, I know we're getting a little short on time here, so we got a couple of quick hits here to just round it all out. Mock again. Do another mock. Do 3 more mocks. Do 10 mock draft as much as you humanly possibly can, or do best ball drafts against real competitors. I like to do best ball. Basically what it is you draft a team, and every week during the season, the highest points getters for each position are automatically pulled into your starting lineup. So it's pretty fun. You don't have to monitor the teams, and it is for money. And the draft app is what I use. I don't know of any other platforms, but I'm sure they're out there. But for me, best ball drafts, I'm drafting against real people with money on the line, which means they are doing their best. And it's not a computer, it's not an algorithm or anything like that. So I like to do best ball draft. You can do them for as little as $1. You can do $1 buy-in or a $3 buy-in or $100 buy-in if you're so inclined. I like to do the cheap ones, basically just to get those mocks in against real good competition. But if you don't want to do that, there are plenty of sites, and I'll use Fantasy Pros as an example because we'll talk about them in a second, that you can do mock drafts on for free. And I'd rather do them against a computer than the mock draft lobbies on ESPN where half the people give up after the third round.
Auto pick.
Those aren't going to do you any good. So I would say either, best ball is a great way to mock and kind of have teams too. And also, just the mock drafts that you're going against, I guess, for lack of a better word, a computer or an algorithm. What do you say, John, about mocks? How many mocks do you think you do a year?
Oh, God. I would just say from May on is at least 1 to 2 a day if I have the time.
So hundreds, basically.
Oh, hundreds, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what you got to do. And a lot of times, like these mocks, like the one on Fantasy Pros, not a sponsor, but they should be. It takes less than 5 minutes. John and I worked together a couple summers ago, and we would literally do them on a break.
We were doing 5 a day. We were doing 5 a day easy.
Oh yeah, no doubt. So, the mock draft that you do in May isn't going to look much like the one you do in July, but it keeps you in tune on all the players and where they're going, what their ADPs are and stuff like that. So mocks are huge. I would prefer, I would suggest best ball drafts over that. But if you don't want to spend the money, just do regular mocks. The other thing, speaking of spending the money, I like to pay for the finer things in life and fantasy, John. I like the luxurious things of fantasy football. I pay for the luxuries of fantasy football, and there are a ton of websites, John. And we'll give Fantasy Pros as an example. Not a sponsor, but they should be. That you can pay, and I pay, I think. So basically, and this is, I'm plugging this, and I don't know why, but I think it was DraftKings. Like if you put in $10 on DraftKings, you got like an MVP membership on Fantasy Pros for like next to nothing. And there's so many good tools. There's a cheat sheet creator, so you can basically make your own rankings. There's a custom mock draft. You can sync to your league. And you can I build a draft board customized to our league. And all the draft picks that are traded, I can input all of that. And literally, for our keeper league, I have a draft board, thanks to that website, that I can just construct our actual draft and keep mocking in those specific scenarios that we're going to have in our real draft.
Yeah, you have the number one pick in that our draft this year, so you're picking from the one, but you get to see the scenarios, and you're going based on the keepers.
But not only that, John. Yeah, because you can input keepers.
Yep.
But not only that, I have 2 picks in the second round. I have 2 picks in the fourth round. I have 2 picks. So I can mock to basically where all my picks are, and I couldn't. In doing a regular mock draft would give me no advantage at all because it's not tuned in to that particular league.
This one adapts, adapts to your settings.
It's so customizable, and those websites have their own rankings. You can, like I said, you can customize your own rankings, do a custom cheat sheet. There's just a lot you can gain from that, and if you find the right deal, like I did, you don't have to pay a ton of money on it. So those paying a little bit can help you make even more, in your actual leagues if you win the league.
Couldn't agree more. I think.
Do you follow any of those sites, John?
No, Fantasy Pros I do. There is some touts out there that do charge quite a bit for their analytics and stuff. I suggest not doing it. I mean, there is some sites that charge like $200-$300 for their fantasy data and their breakdowns.
I would not go that crazy because you don't need to.
No, not if you're doing the right research. You're doing the right, listening to us and everything. Fantasy Pros is the best when it comes to being prepared for mock draft because it adapts to all the settings. I have not found a better site for mock draft.
Stop plugging them.
I'm not trying to.
But they can become a sponsor if they like.
Yes, that would be nice.
And if you guys want us to get sponsors and us to continue to provide this content for you, because we actually lose money on this podcast. We pay about $14 a month to get our podcast put out there into the network, so to speak. So we do have a GoFundMe, but please spread the word, guys. I cannot beg you enough at this point. If you know people, you're in a league if you're listening to this. So, well, frankly, if you don't tell your friends, you should be ashamed of yourself. So.
Yes. So you active listeners, spread the word.
You're a horrible person if you don't share this information with your peers and your friends. But no, we do appreciate you guys listening. Please help spread the word. And those are just some spitballing some stuff on how we win leagues and what helps us win leagues. If you have specific questions, like I said, catch up with us on Twitter, Facebook, our email, armchairfb@gmail.com. You can get a hold of us in many, many different ways. Please like and subscribe on all of our platforms. Please subscribe and leave a very nice review on Apple Podcasts. That is very helpful in getting us into the algorithm more in terms of searches and stuff like that. So just little things like that help a lot. Doesn't cost you a thing. And I will make you feel guilty if you don't.
So is that about it?
That's about it. So stay safe, and we'll see you guys next week.
Okay. See you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for supporting the show. Until next time.